Welcome back to Take Action News, everybody. David Shuster here. It was 5 years ago when New York Governor Eliot Spitzer resigned in office from disgrace after being caught. Well, not literally caught, but after it was revealed that he had been frequenting prostitutes and was client number 9 in a criminal investigation. He resigned from office. There were no criminal charges. He spent the last 5 years trying to rehabilitate his image. And just this past week, he collected enough signatures to be on the ballot to run for comptroller in New York City. Here's what he said when he was seeking those ballot signatures. Of course, only the chaos that a New York City press conference on the street could bring, with people shouting he lied, he frequented hookers, as he's trying to talk about his record. Joining us now to talk about this is Kelly Goff. She's a special correspondent for The Root, also a political analyst. Kelly, welcome to Take Action News.
It's great to be with you.
So, Kelly, you wrote a fascinating column on this past week where you suggested that there perhaps is a double standard between white politicians, black politicians, when it comes to comebacks or second chances. Explain what you meant.
Well, I actually feel that there's a double standard for anyone who's not a straight white male politician. I think that if you're a black politician, a female politician, a transgendered politician, a female, any sort of minority politician, I think that you're not going to have as easy a road as a straight white guy. And I just sort of looked at the record, and it speaks for itself, which is you have Bill Clinton, you have Eliot Spitzer, you have Anthony Weiner, you have Mark Sanford. This cuts across parties, David. And the point that I'm making is that I really have a hard time believing that Hillary Clinton would be living the life that her husband is had she been caught dallying with an intern. And as I pointed out, Monica Lewinsky is certainly not living the life that Bill Clinton is. I mean, last night I heard she's living with her mother and she's unemployed because she has a tough time getting anyone to see past a scandal that also involved, a man, and his name happens to be President Clinton. The other example I gave is you look at who's running for comptroller against Eliot Spitzer, and there's a certain candidate by the name of Kristen Davis, and no, not the actress from Sex and the City, but a woman named Kristen Davis is running, and yet her candidacy is laughed off. Why is that? Because she's a convicted felon. What was she convicted of? Running a brothel that Eliot Spitzer allegedly frequented. So there is just a certain way that I think white, straight, powerful guys are sort of looked at in this country that the rest of us aren't. And that's what I really touched upon in the piece, is that can we really say with a straight face that someone who wasn't Anthony Weiner, Eliot Spitzer, but had some of the additional baggage of being a minority would be given sort of have the red carpet rolled out in the way they both seem to?
What do you think is the reason for it? Is it because of racism or sexism towards minorities and women, or just because of the perception that has always existed that, well, men are going to mess up, and that's always been part of our history, and we just are sort of used to it?
Well, that's a form of sexism, though, because I was going to say, when you asked, is it racism or sexism, in a word, yes. But it's the hardest kind to eradicate, David, because it's really, really subtle and intrinsic. And so what I mean by that is what you just said, a lot of people agree with, even though they don't realize that that's sexism. And what I mean by that is, a guy who sleeps around is called one thing, a woman who sleeps around is called another. And so, the question that kept coming up in conversation after I wrote this piece with friends, particularly female friends, is why is it that a stripper, if a stripper were to run for president, she would be seen as a joke. Every political consultant would tell her she has no chance. But yet, I guarantee you, if we took a poll of members of Congress, Senate, and presidential candidates and asked them if they've ever been to a strip club, what do you want to guess that the number is going to be around, 99.9%? And yet that does not preclude them from running for higher office. So there is this sort of subtle double standard that we have that functions at every level of society that just happens to become more pronounced when someone's examined differently as a public figure. One of the examples I mentioned in the piece is the case of Mitch Daniels, who was considered a very viable Republican potential presidential candidate. And the reason he ended up running is because his family didn't want to face the scrutiny, specifically because his wife had apparently left him for another man at one point. Now, if every male candidate ran for office who had had an affair, ended up not running, we would have had a lot less presidents from our history. But the fact that a woman felt like, and for the record, David, the polling apparently that they did seemed to indicate that was true, that there were, even among women, that women who looked at her suspiciously because she had allegedly done this. So it is so intrinsic in our society. That's why I say it's one of the hardest forms to eradicate, because it's very subtle.
And the way to deal with it is the best way to deal with it. If we're not going to hold, white politicians accountable, we're going to give them a second chance. That we ought to lay off everybody else, or do we give everybody a tough time and say, okay, if you've messed up, regardless of whether you're black or white or male or female, we're going to criticize you or ridicule you.
I think the first place to start actually is acknowledging it even exists. Because, for instance, you're a straight white guy and you're willing to engage in a conversation. There are people who've gotten so uncomfortable that I've even brought this up. And this is not the first time this has happened. A very quick example before we go that I'll throw out is when I said that Susan Rice was being held to a different standard, and people brought up the issue of race. I didn't say John McCain was racist, but there were people who did, who said that the attacks on her were blatantly racist. And I said, let's split the difference. And let's say this. I won't say that the attacks on her were blatantly racist. I will say it's laughable that Senator John McCain would say she's not intellectually qualified. She lacks the intellectual heft for this job, the qualifications. This is a woman who was a Rhodes Scholar, who was a former Assistant Secretary of State, and John McCain saying she's not qualified to be Secretary of State, yet he said Sarah Palin was qualified to be President or Vice President. That's the kind of double standard I'm talking about when it comes to race. And if we talk about it, I think that's a good start, acknowledging
Kelly, I'm with you 100%. Great piece in The Root. Everybody should check it out. Kelly Goff, special correspondent for The Root. Kelly, thanks so much for being part of Take Action News. We appreciate it. The show continues after this.